Welcome to the Latino Newsletter Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Zacarias. And today we have Lalo Alcaraz, who is a Chicano cartoonist, most known for being the author of the comic strip La Cucaracha, the first nationally syndicated, politically themed Latino daily comic strip. Lalo has also worked on the animated TV show Border Town, as well as The Casa Grandes on Nickelodeon. He has served alongside with Gustavo Arellano as a producer on comedian Al Madrigal's TV special for Fusion, Half Like Me. In 2015, Pixar hired Lalo to consult on Coco. You've done it all, Lalo. So now we have the pleasure of being colleagues at Galo News together, where your cartoons have been recognized in the last year by LA Press Club's SoCal Journalism Awards. So the question that I have for you is that there's anything you haven't done that you're still hoping to do.
Yeah, I have my own show, although I'm getting close to running a show. Everybody light your candles. But yeah, I've been knocking off my bucket list, so it's been good. I'd like to win a Pulitzer fully. I've only gotten finalists twice, but I'd like to win one outright.
I was going to ask, what are the two Pulitzer finalist cartoons that you were nominated for?
Well, it's for a body of work for that year, so you'd have to look at the 15 comics you submit. Most contests are kind of like that,
Okay.
so
Okay. So
I
we're
think I'm
we're
on a roll
getting
this year.
closer to the win.
I
Can
can
you
smell it.
Can you tell us a little bit about your work, your upbringing for those who might not be as familiar? You grew up with your Chicano identity influencing your artistic journey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I grew up I had it all for, kind of growing up because I grew up on the border in San Diego, California, and my parents are Mexican immigrants from Sinaloa and Zacatecas, and my mom was undocumented at a time, at a certain time, not the whole time, until she wasn't. And then my dad came over with the Bracero program, entered through Texas, and made his way to Southern California. And my parents met at ESL class at the high school I would eventually graduate from 20 years later, Helix High School in La Mesa, California. And so, which all those things educated my outlook on my artistic outlook, my political outlook. I got to grow up with my immigrant parents and be treated exactly the way they were. I worked with my dad doing landscaping or whatever you want to call it. I would go with my mom to clean middle class white people's houses in San Diego, where I used to think they were mansions, these like houses, because they were so much bigger than the shack I was living in, right? And so I saw it all. And then I saw how people were mistreated on the border and how when you grow up on the border, you go back and forth. So we would go to Tijuana all the time, every 2 weeks or every week. And that's where I picked up my love of comics, really in Tijuana, seeing like newsstands with comic books and Donald Duck in Spanish, which like that influenced me a lot. Reading Disney stuff in Spanish kind of blew my little brain, like it made me just crave more comics in any language. So all of that. And then growing up in San Diego as a Chicano and working with Chicano artists and having Chicano artist mentors that kind of led me to editorial cartooning somehow. Weird
Yeah.
path.
I was going to ask because, there is a couple of steps there between seeing and enjoying comic books and then deciding, like, wait, I'm going to pick up my pen and draw something. What would you say, I guess, are some of the specific moments where you realized art could be used as a tool for activism or storytelling?
Well, it's always storytelling first, I think. I always drew. I used to tell people I used to draw in the womb, and that was very painful for my mother. And like it was like cave drawings in there. And I had the ability. I mean, it kind of runs in my family. Like art runs in my family. We have a gene through my mom's side, the Sinaloa side, and I always say on the Zacatecas side, I got alcoholism. that gene. I would be that kid in school that didn't pay attention in class and would draw on the margins of the paper. And luckily, I had some teachers that recognized this and encouraged it. Like instead of trying to stop me, they encouraged it. And I had a round of good art teachers and teachers that weren't art teachers, but that still nurtured that. And so I highly respect teachers. My wife's a teacher, school teacher, elementary. I got to thank a couple of the teachers before we all got too old and tell them, like, you changed my life. And then as I grew up and I became the editorial cartoonist in college, which every editorial cartoonist you meet, that's where they started pretty much, and that's where I started doing a regular thing where people would give feedback and write hate letters and stuff in college at San Diego State. I used to do cartoons against school spirit and the frats and all that because I hated all that. And so I would generate a lot of hate mail. And a lot of it was racist. It was great. It was the kind of proving ground. But that's where I noticed that, wow, you can have an effect on people. You can get inside their brains, really screw them up,
Would you say that helped build up your tolerance for your current giant fan base and their loud
It's like,
opinion?
it took a long time because it is freaky when you get like a threatening letter. It is not cool. Now it's very commonplace, but it's still bad. It's not good for people to get nasty comments on the internet or to get direct messages. But we all have a little taste of what this is like. Imagine someone constantly calling you up, telling you they're going to beat you down when they see you in the street or something, or they come after your family, or just threats. It's mostly empty threats, but once in a while you got to look out. And yeah, it took me a long time to kind of just start laughing at it, and it became amusing. They say the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I notice every time you post, there's like always a strong reaction, whether it's positive or negative. Like people seem to be anticipating you'll say something or do something. And like in a moment like this where there is so much like at stake politically, how do you balance inserting something like funny commentary into your cartoons?
It's funny when like I'll do a cartoon that is super like hard hitting and serious and barely has a punchline. It just has like a big point, like socks you in the gut or the face. That's when people will write, "This isn't funny, man." Like, yeah, no kidding. That's not what I was going for in this one. You can't hold me to that standard each time. I'm gonna try to be silly and funny because I like being silly and funny. Sometimes that's misinterpreted as callousness. Yeah. Oh yeah. Sometimes the reaction is weirdly wrong, and that's okay. I got a big compliment when I was at a cartooning convention in Maryland a few months ago. I'm trying to remember, in Bethesda, and a master cartoonist said, was breaking down one of my cartoons on screen, my Charlie Kirk cartoon that I did, and he was like, this is like Lalo should be the co-president of cartooning because this cartoon is this and that. And he said, but the biggest compliment was, and he makes the reader do a little work, makes the viewer work a little to get the cartoon complete idea, So yeah, even though I do blunt, direct cartoons, but I don't like to just lay it all out there so that it's like an ABC. You got to work a little bit. You got to use the coco that God gave you, which is what my mom used to say all the time.
The other thing that I think is really interesting is like over the course of like all the decades that you've worked, obviously you've always represented for Chicano identity, but I'm wondering whether you feel like representation of Latinos or Chicano identity has changed over the course of those decades. Do you feel like it's more inclusive, or do you feel like you're kind of running into the same sorts of barriers?
It depends on the situation. I mean, obviously, there was that weird moment it was a few years ago, and most people don't even care about this because they're not like academics, or maybe they didn't even go to college. Mexican hegemony was a thing this like theory that you could tell a total academic came up with it, but it was like anti-Mexican. Like basically, it was like there's too many Mexicans, and this was like propagated by like Central American academics in the U.S. And it's fine, it's an opinion or whatever, but they tried to use it as like a hammer against Chicano studies and Chicanismo and everything. And I mean, I mean, there's there's 110 million Mexicans. What do you? Of course, most things are going to be about Mexicans. In the Latino sphere, right? And of
Yeah.
course, we try to recognize everybody. I try to. Look, I got it. Look what I got right there. and
Yeah, no. And there's like a
uh,
diversity in the way that Mexicans are also represented, or there should be, right? And I had mentioned this to some of my friends out here. I was like, I spent most of my childhood seeing depictions of Chicanos and Mexicans that were very West Coast adjacent because that's where
yeah,
the media is. But
yeah,
Mexicans in Chicago aren't necessarily like that, and Mexicans in other places. So
yeah,
yeah, there's so much diversity even within like one demographic.
yeah. I love it. There's Chicanos from Puebla, and there's Chicanos from if you're in LA, half the people are from Zacatecas. Like, and I'm half Zacatecan. But I
Mhm.
know a professor. I know a professor that you know calls himself like Zacatecan. He doesn't. It's
Mhm.
like they take the nationalism argument way over the top, and I know it shouldn't annoy me as much because normal people don't think like that. Like regular people. That's the people I'm trying to reach. I like that I have a big middle class older audience because they have jobs. They could buy my merch. That's great. But I want to reach everybody, and it would be nice. And I'm not. I'm trying more to represent than to change their minds. I'm trying to just be like rally. Like,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm doing politically. I think with like the my extracurricular stuff like this, which is not in any of my editorial cartoons. It's more of I wanted to make a bunch of prints on this, but there's another project actually I'm working on, like this, that inspired this, and I could talk about that too, the album, but we can talk about that a little later after we solve all the problems of Mexican representation. I was going to say also that generationally with Mexican American people, because thanks to the internet, thanks to social media, I've seen that people started calling themselves just Mexican in the U.S., and that's super interesting to me, and that kind of like has made stuff go a little broader, like against the tide of the Zacatecan Americans and the Sinaloan Americans, and so that's been kind of cool to see young people embrace that and embrace the flag and the immigrant debates and just
Yeah.
get be political. It's been like I don't care if you call yourself Chicano or not. That's just the
Well,
labels for me.
it's so interesting that you say that you have this following of kind of like middle age, working class, like older fans. Do you see like a new wave of younger Lalo fans coming out, or have you seen mostly the same fans just growing with you?
No, I've seen both. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to brag, but I do actually. I mean, it's mostly like people. I really love it when people come up and say, "My grandma turned me on to your comics." It's like I feel like 1,000 years old at that point. But kids are reading the stuff. The parents are like, some. So I met a kid who's like, my parents forced me to read your stuff. Like, oh, I'm sorry. They're like, no, it's cool. But I like it. So, and then I've been since newspapers have been collapsing. I put everything online, not behind a paywall. Like I put it out there so that people share it, read it, and that has helped a ton.
Mhm.
So I don't. I don't have a Substack or anything like that. So I'm too disorganized to have a thing with premiums and shit, like I can't.
I mean, you have a
So
pretty meaty Instagram following, and social media has definitely, felt very active for you. Are you a fan of the accessibility that social media provides? Because I know you said it can be really alarming when people go very hard in the comics or like,
oh yeah, especially when they misunderstand something. It's like, oh, or they like usually won't write anything if they're coming at me. I just let them go because I've seen it before 1,000 times. They're not very clever. And but when people misinterpret and like reshare it with a erroneous, like totally mistaken take on it, then I'll write and over explain what I was trying to do. Usually, I hate that. I can't stand it.
yeah.
But otherwise, it's a benefit. Social media is great. Again, people like I agree with the statement that social media has allowed stupid people to communicate with each other, and that's bad. That's why we're in the situation we're in right now since 2020 and the pandemic.
Yeah. Would you say, because I know you mentioned earlier, like you had a lot of, I guess, like mentors or people that you looked up to when you were first kind of like diving into your own creation and artistic process. Um, how do you feel about that in this moment? Like, is there any advice that you would give to a young Chicano artist who's trying to break into this medium?
The landscape is completely different from when I started. I mean, all analog and having barely having like the beginnings of the internet to it wasn't big enough to really publicize stuff. Email was like exciting. Like that was like you could communicate with all kinds of people that you never met before, and then it grew from that. But I mean, I would tell young people like just keep doing what an artist would do. Draw all the time, create all the time, and open your eyes and ears and brain to other ways of thinking and have that inform you. I live by the a good artist borrows, a great artist steals, and because the great artist stealing that artist will improve whatever they stole. And that's just how art and literature is made. Music, you just build, and so you got to keep your eyes and ears open. And but mainly, I'll say just keep drawing. And if you're meant to for this, it's a life sentence. You're doomed. You just do it. And follow it.
Speaking of stealing, do you have thoughts or opinions about, sentiments that like AI art it can replace, say like
Do I? Yeah, man. I've been really anytime any chance I get to post against people making flyers and making posts with AI, mostly cartoons and stuff. I feel like that's sad. It's like I know people like to play with gadgets and tech, but it bums me out to see people like, oh, here's something I created. No, you didn't. It's more like I created it and the machine sucked it up and spit it out in this other format. So I mean, I'm a human, flesh and blood, and that bums me out. On the flip side, I like apps that will help you make a song. Because I will use those to write comedy songs. I write it. I just need the music, and I don't have that skill set, so I steal it from that. It is totally a like a it's derivative, and it's not anything original. But that's not the point for me. The point for me is just get some backup for my silly funny song about Christy Nome. don't let her in your home because she'll blow up your porcelain, your toilet. And or I did a Trump song the other day, which was pretty good. But I also have friends that are musicians, so if I really want to make a song, I'll call them. And I'm actually going to do something like that for this new project I'm working on.
Which you cannot share more about quite just yet, correct?
Like that. Oh no, well, that applies to the TV project I'm working on, which I'll talk about that for a second. But the TV project I'm working on, I'll be the showrunner for this animated show, and I think it's a no-brainer. It should sell. It's a very well-known social media IP. It would be funny as hell, and I'll probably get canceled 10 ways this Sunday if it goes through. And I'm looking forward to it so much because it's so funny. And it's just my, sense of humor. And it's funny. The other day I was at some other meeting and they said, oh, yeah, people that write for kids television want to do adult television so bad. And I'm like, that's me. I like to write offensive jokes, get me in trouble all the time. Like what I remember is I wrote some joke about something, and I said, I probably said, chinga tu madre. And oh my God, I got lectured by the language police about you shouldn't use that because it's offensive to mothers and women. I'm like, well, that's why it's offensive, because it's about your mom. It's like every culture says F your mom or whatever. That's what hurts a person. So I sometimes I lose my mind on this stuff. But anyways, language police, leave me alone. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. I don't care. I don't care how hard you cancel me. But so that's I am gonna ask my friends to write music for this show if we should be so lucky to sell the show. But then, and I know like I've worked in Hollywood since the 90s, and I pretty much know every Latino that works in Hollywood, even the kids. The other day, you might have seen I gave an award to Xolo Maridueña, Blue Beetle, right?
Yeah.
Cobra Kai guy,
Cobra Kai, yeah.
He's like, his uncle is like my friend who's a Chicano artist, Jose Ramirez. I was like, no way, are you kidding me? And then his mom was like, yeah, I think you met Xolo when he was like in diapers, and I'm like, yes, I'm pretty sure I saw him running around his tia's store in Eagle Rock, and she had a bookstore. And anyways, the world is so small, but I do know lots of people, and I can, or I have friends that can call people and ask them for favors, which brings me to this next thing, which is a music album called Contra ICE, and it's a musical compilation album. It's a benefit for Chirla, Unión del Barrio, and National Day Labor Organizing Network. And we're going to do a musical compilation album, at least one volume, probably two, because we have so many people who want to be on it. And we're going to do a concert next year. And we got really big names on this. It was a brainchild of Ulises from Ozo Motley, and it's got Ozo, Los Lobos, Tom Morello, Jello Biafra, I think, has signed on, the famous punk rocker. And we're trying to get Henry Rollins. We got Las Cafeteras. We got all these other bands. I have no idea who they are because I'm not a hipster. And we've got for comedy, we've got Fred Armisen from Saturday Night Live, Cholo Fit Creeper, this guy.
Yeah, he's great.
And more people. And I'm the art director on the project, and I'm doing this kind of stuff for it, and it's been really cool so far. It's really taken off, and it's going to be a thing, and but yeah, we've got engineers, we got all kinds of, famous rock stars that are helping out with engineering, and secret donors helping with the money, and it's a cool thing. So and I'm gonna have an ICE recruiting sketch on there, that where I'm gonna do all the voices, and I'm gonna tweak them
Wow.
with artificial intelligence so that I sound like Christy Nome.
Just looking back on everything that you've worked on, everything you're hoping to continue working on, what kind of legacy do you hope that your art leave behind in your community?
Hmm. Well, first I was going to say, I don't know if I could work it into the answer, but it has been great. And I've been so privileged to work on Calo News, where, my bucket list included being the editorial cartoonist for the LA Times, right? And which is not happening. They don't have editorial cartoonists there anymore, and they're not going to have any. And I've asked, and but I'm doing a very close thing to it, which is having this platform, Calo News, where we report on local news, on Latino news, on regional news, and I get to draw cartoons about pretty much anything I want. And I'm always trying to find the local angle, or at least the Southwest angle, on things. Although I admit I've drawn way too many ICE cartoons, but ICE is part of our lives right now. So, but and my legacy, I hope that, people want to use critical thinking, and want to stop just believing everything that's on the internet, and maybe using the coco that God gave them. And I hope that my cartoons help with that. I do get told by teachers, when I go across the country, I use your cartoons in my class to, and they're high school teachers and college, and that we have a weekly, cartoon of yours and some other ones, and we talk about the news. And that editorial cartoons have been used for that for decades. That they're great for that, because they capture, they chronicle the moment and as and a point of view on a story, like a 1,000-word essay just can't. No offense to all my writer friends, but I taunt them, and I say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I have outwritten all of you, and I'm gonna keep going. But yeah, I hope that people also will see the history of the times. That from when I started editorial cartooning, the issues were, not the on steroid version that it is now, but when I was in San Diego, it was violence at the border, it was racism, it was racial profiling against Mexicans, and all those things. We got them in we're overly blessed with those now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I hope people can draw that line and see how it progressed, if you want to call it that.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate your scathing comics, your social critiques. We love to see your projects coming out, so definitely keep us posted. And thank you again for being here.
It was my pleasure. And as you can see, I cleaned up my office just for you.
Thank you so much. This episode of the Latino Newsletter podcast was produced by Joaquin Cotler, Juan Diego Ramirez, and Michelle Zacarias. It was edited by Julio Ricardo Varela, music by Cast of Characters via Soundstripe.
Season 2 of the Latino Newsletter podcast was made possible through individual donations and the Latino Media Consortium. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the guest and host, and don't necessarily reflect those of the Latino Newsletter or its staff.